And I feel
Mhm.
like instinctively, this is the time where there is a disruption that is going to come into media, because you see now a lot of media companies are downside. You have Twitter, which is operating as its own media company, which gets the news faster than any media company can compete with. Then you have AI, which is also annoyingly, unexpectedly being a competitor to media, right? You have these media companies that are just pushing out AI stories, and a lot of it isn't real. Social listening is really good. But one of the things that our audience always tells us is they say, if it's not on the shade room, we don't believe it. I think that engagement is always going to be important to me, because, that's kind of changing as well. I think that, as the business has grown, as the more people that you reach, engagement, it naturally goes down. Skill set is extremely important. If you have someone who has skill set but no intuition, you'll miss the mark. Even you can have all of the expertise, but you'll miss the mark in the industry that I'm in.
Welcome to another episode of eCoffee with Experts. I'm here with Angie Nwandu, and she is the CEO and founder of the Shade Room Media Company, along with a lot of other accolades. Before we jump in, I just want to read a couple of these. Listen to this. 2017 BET Hip Hop Award winner. First of all, insane. Forbes 30 under 30, Time Magazine, 30 most influential people on the internet, TechCrunch, female founders of the year. We're going to use up the whole podcast time if I go through all of your accolades. Angie, welcome to eCoffee with Experts.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this combo.
Me too. Me too. I always like to start the conversation to give the audience an idea of where you're coming from. So when it comes to media and marketing and what's changing, I guess, where do you spend your time? Where do you spend your mental energy and your focus? What do you spend the most time thinking about these days?
When it comes to business, my main focus is thinking about what the new landscape for media is. Because I feel like, when I first came into media in 2014, media was at it was facing a disruption, right? A disruption needed to happen. It was when the www dot was like dying and people did you didn't think about the last time you went to a www dot for news. We don't do that. We just see it. It just pops up in our newsfeed on social media. And so at that time, the websites were dying, and I unintentionally came in to disrupt, media in that sense, especially in regards to entertainment and celebrity news, because I was publishing directly to Instagram. And so because this business was birthed through a disruption, I've always thought, well, what's the next disruption? Because it's only so long before another disruption is needed, right? And I feel
Mm-hmm.
like instinctively, this is the time where there is a disruption that is going to come into media, because you see now a lot of media companies are downsizing. They're having trouble keeping the news departments. You know what I mean? You have Twitter, which is operating as its own media company, which gets the news faster than any media company can compete with, because it doesn't have to be confirmed, nor do they have to pay for any Getty images. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
Right. And so it trends before you even get to hop on it. Then you have AI, which is also annoyingly, unexpectedly being a competitor to media, right? You have these media companies that are just pushing out AI stories, and a lot of it isn't real. And so when you think about the public sentiment, it's hard to find news that they can trust. At first it was like, we don't trust traditional media because they have all of these agendas. If you go on one platform, they may be leaning far, far, far right or far, far, far left. There's just
Mm-hmm.
agendas. And so that's when independent media companies started to get, a lot of attention, because people were like, I want my news independent, with no agenda. I don't want traditional news. But now you have a lot of independent media companies coming up, and they're putting out fake news, and it's overwhelming. But then you also have the streamers who are now breaking news stories and reporting on news stories live. And it's like, as
Mm.
a company, you have to figure out, what is my relationship to streaming, to AI, to social media, TikTokers who are becoming like news sources. Like, you have to figure that out, because you don't want to be left behind. Like, you don't want this to be a Blockbuster Netflix situation. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
everybody is trying to figure out, what is the next, iteration of media.
Man, I could not agree more. And I think it's really cool that you see disruption as an opportunity. And I think that's a hallmark of great founders and great business people. While the whole world is like talking about the dip, they're talking about it in a different way than the people who are going to come out on top in 2, 3, 5 years.
Yeah,
Tell me a
always an opportunity, but it's also a death, right? Like
Mm,
anyone who's not flexible or adaptable or who is not keen on, just understanding the industry, you get left behind, right? You can
yeah.
very quickly get left behind. However, it's always opportunity. There's always something that is being birthed in every disruption. And if you're adaptable, you can reap beautiful benefits from it, right? We built our company was viral, you know what I mean, from the onset
Yeah.
because we rode the wave of a disruption. And so I think that I always because of how I started, I have a positive viewpoint on disruption. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think of the shade room as a reflection of culture, like what's the saying? It's like if it doesn't if it gosh, it's escaping me. It's like basically if it's not bad, like it doesn't sell, something like that, in terms of a title. Um
Yeah. Oh, you mean like
Say it again?
in terms of a title, like the name?
Yeah, yeah. Like if you're breaking a news story, like there always has to be some like aspect of like, oh no to it.
Uh,
Um
well, you know what? Okay, so
you know what I'm talking about?
no, I completely understand what you're saying. You're saying salacious news is the one that sells. Yeah.
Yes,
Well,
salacious. That's hilarious. Yeah.
yes and no. So, like, because we're on social media, I think we've had to maneuver kind of differently. Everybody's always gonna like salacious news, or everybody's always gonna like a breaking news story where, something drastic happens. You know what I mean?
Mm,
That people are
mhm,
always attracted to that. However, because we were on social media, when we started to do the analytics, we found that those are not the stories that people like to share because
mm,
people like to consume those stories in private. They don't like to, I mean, apart from like the influencers on TikTok or on the streamers who will talk about it because they're kind of like culture, they're in the business of culture commentary, but the average person doesn't want to share that to their story. They don't want everybody knowing that that's what they indulge in, right? So it's kind of like a
yeah,
secret. Whereas the positive stories, oh, someone had a baby or someone got married or, somebody, the more happy, positive, funny stories tend to be shared way more, in people's
mm,
stories and, people share it on their pages. And that usually causes it to get a larger reach. So while and more engagement, right? So
mhm,
it's not as cutthroat as you think, but I think if you're talking about a www dot website, yes, the clicks, everybody's going to click and that's going to be what
yeah,
gets clicks. But because we have a social media first business, we have to always keep in mind that those positive stories reach far and wider, more impressions, more engagement because people are not ashamed to engage with it. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, it's a great point. It's a great point. Because I'm thinking of my Instagram DMs, and they're all memes with people who I haven't physically talked to in like literally 10 years, but we still send each other funny stuff back and forth. I'm not going to send them like, it's only the people who I'm closely related to, like my mom, who will send me stuff that I'm like, I don't want to watch that
Yes.
right now. Like, you know
Yes.
what I mean? Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about the business side in this like post AI world. I'm curious what sort of business metrics you're looking at that are reflecting success, that are reflecting like, things that actually mean something to the business that are not just vanity metrics.
I mean, I think that engagement is always going to be important to me because, I mean, but that's kind of changing as well. I think that, as the business has grown, as the more people that you reach, engagement, it naturally goes down.
Mhm.
So, but your audience actually being engaged with your content is still going to be one of the biggest metrics. I think impressions are
Mhm.
not as important anymore to a lot of people. I think for me, brand perception is really big too. You know what I mean? Especially in this climate because when people are getting tired of saying, is this AI? Is this not AI? Is this
Yeah.
real? It's not real. And I think that, the pendulum swings heavily, right? So yes, we swung into the AI multiverse, right? And it's like
Uh-huh.
it's very huge, but I think because people are so overwhelmed by it that it's gonna swing back where people are gonna say, "Hey, we just want something authentic and something real." That's something that even outside of media, that's something I've noticed with brands. Brands at first were like, "Okay, we're going heavily into AI. We're gonna use AI models," and you know what I mean, and all of this type.
Mhm.
And then I did a panel with some of the people who were on the campaign for Levi's with Beyonce, and they were
Mm.
like, we want to go more authentic. You know what I
Mm.
mean? We want
Hmm.
to through AI and be more authentic micro influencers and really connect with the audience, right? Because we want to stand out in a world full of AI. You know what I mean? And so I think
Yeah.
um those I would say are engagement and brand perception is top of my list.
Yeah, I love that brand perception, especially moving forward. I can't remember. I was just having a conversation with someone about that. My background, I've had experiences in community management and whether that's physical communities or online communities. I'm glad you're bringing this up with the pendulum thing because it was like, man, dot-com boom and then like social media boom. And now I think, there's a lot of people who are thinking that AI will continue that social media boom, but I don't think it's the case. I think it's swinging more
Why
back
do you
to
think that way?
well, I think like as you kind of said, if we don't really know what's real online anymore, we will want to come back to the people who we absolutely trust
Yeah.
and trust can be built most easy in person, I think, and over time. But maybe that comes down to community. Maybe that comes down to events happening more often. But with the Shade Room, I think you've done a really good job of curating that community. How do you think of keeping that trust across across a platform and across a brand if you're having people who are maybe outside of your internal team like contribute and sort of influence the content as if it were, a mirror.
So we've always, I think one of the things that helps us is that we have been doing this for 12 years. It's
Mhm.
like you go to Craigslist, right? You know what you're getting from Craigslist. You've already built a rapport with them. So we have built a rapport from with our audience, and what I often hear, social listening is really good. Okay, I think
Yeah.
that's the thing. Social listening is something we're investing in even more heavily. But one of the things that our audience always tells us is they say, if it's not on the Shade Room, we don't believe it. So they
Mm.
kind of use us as a benchmark, right? You know what I mean? A reputable source where they're like, okay, it's so much happening. We see so many stories, especially within Black celebrity culture. I don't know why that's where AI has boomed first. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
then, because if you go on, no, like it's a serious thing. I think NBC News did a whole report on it. Like if you go on YouTube, you know why? Because the audience is more inclined to believe or click on it and engage with that content, and so that's where you go on YouTube, there's whole channels from India and Asia, you know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah.
Black celebrity news culture with
Yeah.
fake stories. So it impacts us at a different kind of rate. But with all of that, they're like, we have to go somewhere where we know the brand and where we've had experience with them and they're reputable. So because of that, we already have that brand perception, and
Mm.
still the roommates are still able to shift our platform. It's just becoming harder because most of our news comes from the roommates. I like to see, I mean, obviously I have journalists that work for the Shade Room, but they all operate like moderators. We
Mm.
wanted part of why the community was so potent, right? With the Shade Room is because they think they own the Shade Room. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Like
yeah, yeah.
it's their platform. They know that if they don't like a story, whether it's they think it's too mean or they whatever, they can get the story taken down. And we give them that
Mm.
ability because if we offend them, they're like, hey, what I mean? They can shift, the stories for the day, right?
Yeah.
We listen to what stories they're most interested in. And I think that they still have that power, but it's becoming increasingly harder because you can look at
Mhm.
it with your two eyes and feel like you're seeing something that you're not. You know what I mean? Because of AI.
Yeah.
You just have to go through so much AI slop. You know what I mean? To make sure
Yeah.
that I mean, and it's getting so tricky nowadays, right? And so, but we still have our journalists who are researchers who will investigate and make sure that we're still holding to the standard.
Yeah. I actually have a question about that, talking about standards, talking about, because the brand obviously has the founder and essentially the brand as it grows, it all comes from, the founder. It's a direct reflection to a certain extent. And
Mhm.
it seems that you've had like an eye for things that just catch fire online and are popular. What sort of characteristics or skills or principles do you look for when you're bringing people into like your closer inner circle business wise?
Oh, you mean like other founders?
Not other founders, but I'm talking about like, is there someone who has like is very funny or is,
Oh, you mean like the people that I hire?
yeah, yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think one of the key things is I would say the only qualification, because I wasn't in journalism. I didn't get a journalism degree nor a media. I had no media background at all.
Mhm.
My only qualification, and most would say I was unqualified, was that I was an observer. I was
Mm.
very observant, right?
Mhm.
And I would observe people on a level where I could, see the nuances, right? And
Mhm.
for instance, like if I, you know, I'll send a post and say, "Why do you think this is funny?"
Mm.
It's very important to break down why people found that to be funny. And I can tell by the way that somebody breaks down a post and tells me why this was funny, why did this go viral, the kind of person that I'm dealing with, right? Like
Mm.
when I used to look at why things went viral, I would look at the video. I probably watched the video 100 times. Then I would
Mm.
go in comments. Then I would go to each, of the top comments. I would go to their pages. I would go to their stories. I would look through their highlights. I want to know the kind of people that found this funny. I
Yeah.
want to comments why what was the relatability, what was it that made this different from every other video, you get what I'm saying?
Mm. Mhm.
And then I would look at the commentary because a lot of times, like even on TikTok, they do the duets, and I'm just studying human nature. I think there's a level of psychology that you have to really understand. And so
Mhm.
I like people whose brain kind of ticks in a way where they dive deeper than the surface. Because once you innately understand what makes something funny to
Mhm.
a group of people or what makes evoke some sort of emotion, whether we've brought people to tears on the shade room, but not always because of something, a celebrity passing, but it may be
Mhm.
that we did a creative about doctors who got their residence, you know what I mean, and like, you know what I'm saying, and we get the family,
Yeah.
we exactly what to do to make
Yeah.
you cry tears of joy or to make you laugh, you know what I mean, and I feel like
Mhm.
people come to a destination and they feel emotion, even if it's not media, like it could be a brand, you know what I mean, they have to feel something, and it will resonate with them and they'll remember you, as a
Mm.
brand. I think that that's what I look for, whether you just have a talent for being funny or whether
Mhm.
you are inquisitive and
Yeah.
very, just investigative, you know what I mean? Whether you are creative and you just have a tact for creativity. I look for people who have different skill sets, and it's not your traditional skill set. Now, obviously, you do have to have a journalism degree because it's a lot on the line, but
Mhm.
everybody has leans a certain way. You know what I mean? Everybody has a certain talent, and I'm really looking for the personality because that's what shines through, you know?
Yeah. 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 There's a couple different angles to hiring, and I've heard both ways are successful. One is like you hire for drive or hire for personality, and then you can train for skill. And then there's the other side that's like, no, I need 80% skill, and then like if I like you or if you seem like a hard worker, then that's like it falls to the bottom. It almost seems like although the qualifications, right, like you said, are important, journalism, there's a lot on the line. You're a huge established brand with like 6 billion, monthly visitors, which is crazy. There has to be an element of professionalism and experience in there. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But in the like what we're seeing, I think the shift is taste. It's not just reporting, but it's like the perspective of what we're reporting on by the people is what's attracting and continuing that snowball effect. And I think that's where, at least with the conversations that I'm having and the trends that I'm seeing, is like taste is what is becoming more and more important in media, in
Yeah.
marketing, because things are becoming so niche and so nuanced. I think people are starting to understand what 8 billion people really means
Mm,
in the world. They're like, "Oh my gosh, like I can have these weird things, these weird quirks about me, and there's probably like thousands of other people who have that same, subset of quirk, and I want to hang out with those people." So,
right.
man, the personality traits are
You know,
shining through.
this skill set is important. Like, I think certain positions, you know what I mean? It depends
Mhm.
what we're talking about. When we're talking about the C-suite, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
skill set is extremely important. No, personality cannot trump skill set in that sense. However, have you ever had a really skilled person who just did not have the intuition? Because I like to balance it, right? Intuition and skill set go together, right? You know what I mean? To make a perfect blend. If you have someone who has skill set but no intuition, you'll miss the mark. Even you can have all of the expertise, but you'll miss the mark in in the industry that I'm in. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
I guess if it's something straightforward like tech or something engineering or something like that, it may be different. But when it comes to media and like marketing and all of that, it's a skill set, but there has to be something in you. You know what I mean? To be
Mhm.
able
Yes.
to understand what people like on a deeper level. You can use analytics to understand what people like, but to speak to them authentically is a different thing. And I think that you have to kind of find people who are from the culture of the group that you're trying to target, or who understand. Like, for instance, if you're a real skateboarder and this is your thing that you're very interested in, you'll know little nuances that no one else will know. You know what I mean?
Yes.
You know how to reach them. And that is a skill set. That intuition and that nuance is a skill set to me.
Yeah.
It's even more valuable because it's so hard to find.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It takes a long time to develop typically.
It takes a
They're
long time to develop and it's very hard to find. Yeah.
Mhm. Tell me a little bit more about the social listening aspect because I completely agree. Like just the quick off the top of your head process that you went through, I can tell that that is something that you do quite often. Like actually, you're not just making it up. Do you
Mhm.
have a sort of like a social listening process, SOP, or at least like, principle that your team follows?
Well, yeah, I think that okay, I would like to think I've been doing social listening
Uh-huh.
without that term. I didn't know
Before it
what.
was cool. Yeah.
Yeah, before it was cool. I think that that's how I built the community, was through social listening. Like, literally, they were the ones who built the Shade Room and told
Yeah.
me what it needed to be. I think that now we're trying to do it in a more sophisticated way, right? Like, we're hiring a company, you know what I mean? You know what I mean,
Yeah.
to help us with social listening, because what I learned is that, like, yeah, I went far on intuition, but now it's like data and analytics.
Yeah.
I've bowed down. I've bowed down to it. I'm like, okay, fine. You know what I mean? Because there are
Uh-huh.
things I didn't know about my audience that social listening couldn't tell me. But social listening was very, a big part of it. For instance, the roommates named themselves the roommates. I
Mm.
didn't give them that name. They were the ones saying, hey, we come to the Shade Room every day. You know what I mean? We're like the Navy. You know Rihanna, how she had the Navy, and we're like Nicki Minaj, the Barbs. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
Like, we should have our own name. And I didn't,
Mm.
listening to them was important because I underestimated how important naming your community is.
Mm.
Because once you name them, they start to identify with each other, and
Mm.
the community, in my opinion, becomes stronger.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they're like, we are the roommates. We're in here every day. We feel like we live together. The Shade Room feels like a place. And so we want to be called the roommates. And it empowered them to move, in such a way, you know what I mean, to identify themselves, you know what I mean? And so that was a powerful brand move, but I wouldn't have known that other from analytics or anything. I knew that because they told me that this is what they wanted to be called. And so I think it's very, very important.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There was I was listening to a podcast with James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, and he was talking about the type of person versus the adjective that describes the person. Like,
Mhm.
I am, he gives the example in the book about smokers. When two people who are avoiding cigarettes are both offered a cigarette, one says, no thanks, I'm not smoking right now, or I'm trying to quit smoking.
Mhm.
And then the other person says, no, I'm not a smoker. The association of being that type of person like carves out this niche and can go as deep as you want it to go when you're trying to build a brand. And I think that's exactly what what you found. How do you feel like that's going to be like? Well, let me ask a different question. Do you feel like there will be more breakoffs or like sub communities or sub niches as you continue to grow the Shade Room?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's actually where I think that is so important for the future. I think that I've just found that those niche communities actually move the needle a little further. And I think that brands know that now. They have seen how, and I mean, this is different, right? But it's the same. They've seen how you can take, we all know this, you can take a micro influencer with 10,000 followers and push a product more than somebody who has like 500,000 followers,
Yeah.
because niche communities are just, I would say, the engagement and the rapport is greater. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so and I think people are kind of hungry right now for more niche communities because of
Hmm.
the just the overwhelming nature of media at this point. Like, for instance, like
Hmm.
when you look at podcasts, all the podcasts, I mean, all the conversations, you know what I mean? No, not yours, not
Yeah.
yours. Not
Oh, of
yours.
course not mine. We're the only marketing podcast in the world.
Yes. No.
No,
But
but I know what you mean. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, you have to build a niche community. And I think we see these communities popping up more and more. And I definitely think that's the wave. That's the
Yeah.
wave.
I mean, I completely agree. On the other side of that, I mean, tell me a little bit about how you're thinking about partnerships, like business partnerships, brand partnerships. Like what are some of the things? Let me break that down a little bit more narrow. What are partnerships that you're currently looking for right now or are open to that would really help you out?
Well, I think that I was just at CAA and WME, and they're building entire departments to partner brands with media in the way of like content. You know what I mean? So like this is just an example. Like let's say
Mm-hmm.
Goldfish wanted to partner with the Shade Room for a series that has nothing to do with Goldfish. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? But we just want to do a vertical drama.
Why not?
You get what I'm saying? So I've noticed those partnerships happening more and more, and it's actually perfect because rather than a lot of media that we're trying to figure out where the pivot is, you know what I mean, going
Mm-hmm.
into content programming. And so being
Mm-hmm.
able to have that funded by brands who want to find a unique way to reach the audience through like a series or you know what I mean, and
Mm.
more of that. Those I'm really interested in those partnerships.
Yeah.
Honestly, it serves it is two hits two birds with one stone. You understand what I'm saying? We get what we need as a media company to move forward, but then also we're giving the brand that unique engagement, right? And so I'm interested in a lot of those partnerships. That's a really interesting place to go.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. And one of the podcasts that I had, it's unreleased, but we were talking about influencer partnerships or like micro influencer, nano influencer, exactly what you were saying, that sometimes the smaller influencers who have a more engaged audience can drive, it depends on the goal, but they can drive larger outsized results if maybe revenue or engagement is the target. So those sort of even like influencer partnerships or like again brand.
Agencies, a lot of we've talked about that. Should we have an agency where we have these micro influencers and we connect them to these big advertisers? But those
Yeah.
has always existed. I mean, that's been when I first came out, I wasn't around with another agency before that did that same thing, right? So
Mm.
their agencies have always been around, but it hasn't been around from the perspective of media having an influencer agency. You get what I'm saying? I've looked into that too. That's something that I'm thinking about. As well as TikTok, like they're shifting to focus more on TikTok Shop. You get what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
they have seen the success. So like that is one of their top goals this year is TikTok Shop. And so figuring out
Mhm.
and honestly, if you look at my living room, it's full of TikTok Shop stuff. I bought these
Ah.
like it's crazy. I buy the most weird things from TikTok Shop. I'm like, I am addicted, and it's not the big influencers that get me. It's people I've never even seen before. These just they maybe have like 5,000 followers or something, like or less.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
I just believe you because you said you liked it, and I don't think you're like sold to the machine yet. You know, I don't
Yeah,
know,
yeah, yeah, yeah. You still have a soul.
right? You still have a
Right.
soul, or I mean, I don't know,
Yeah.
but what I'm trying to say is that yeah, they are a lot more impactful and powerful.
Yeah. Oh man, I mean, I'm just conscious of time. There's so much more to talk about. I mean, so
Mhm.
much more is happening. Even if we ended this podcast and we visited a part 2 next week, there's nothing we couldn't even run out of topics.
Yes, yes.
Like things are changing so fast, moving so fast. Maybe next time we have a third person and they are a freaking AI influencer in the room. Like we don't know. So
Hey, I'm
much.
not totally against AI influencers. I mean, they've been tricking me. They've been doing a really good job.
Yeah.
I think they need probably like another year before it's like
Yeah.
perfect. Their
Yeah.
skin's too glossy. But you know what I mean? Once they get the ridges of the skin, I think
Yeah.
so
Maybe it's Maybelline, okay? Wow. Angie Nwandu, where can we learn more about you, the Shade Room? Where should we go to connect?
go to the Shade Room on Instagram and all platforms and theshaderoom.com. And then me, I have a small Instagram page. I'm pretty low key, but my personal Instagram is at no IG Angelica because I don't really IG that much. But that's where you can contact me.
Okay. Awesome. Well, I hope the audience does because you are a wonderful founder, an absolute powerhouse of a businesswoman. And I appreciate all you do for culture, society, the Black community, the white community, and just media in general. So it's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.